All of our productions at GCTV are sponsored in part by Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. Greenfield Community College, providing access and excellence in higher education in the Pioneer Valley. Visit them at gcc.mass.edu. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com. Call them at 772-0838 and check them out on Facebook. Real Cleaning Services, cleaning Hampshire and Franklin County since 1972. We don't cut corners, we clean them. Check them out online at realclean.com. Call them at 413-422-1143. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. The Solar Store of Greenfield, replacing fossil fuels and nuclear power one home at a time. Visit them at 23 Fisk Ave. Call them at 413-772-3122 or visit them online at solarstoreofgreenfield.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all of GCTV's productions.
Welcome everybody to our next very exciting fiscal year 2019 budget discussion meetings. Tonight we'll be discussing schools. And once again, we're here at the Ways and Means Committee. We're at GCTV 15 at 393 Main Street, 3rd floor. And today is Wednesday, April 25th of the year 2018. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 5:39. Sorry for those at home. I know there's so many people watching at home right now, so I'm sorry for starting a little bit late. And with that being said, we will have our chair statement. This meeting is being recorded, videotaped, and broadcasted. If any other persons present are doing the same, please notify me at this time. Seeing none, we'll take a roll call. Counselor Alice. Oh, I always mark myself absent. Counselor Alice is not here. Counselor Mayo.
Here.
Counselor Pyfrom is absent. Counselor Sund.
Here.
We will just be doing discussion tonight, so that's fine. If we do not have a quorum, no votes will be taken. We do not have any approval of minutes. We do not have a public hearing. We have no motions tonight. Moving right along to our budget discussion. So counselors, if you can please open your budget books. And I believe first, we'd like to speak with the Four Rivers Charter School if someone's in the audience tonight. Seeing none. Smith Vocational, if they're here. I know they joined us last year. Seeing none. So we'll start with the Franklin County Technical School. And I'm sorry, but I'm not sure what page that's on.
Public schools start on 112.
112. So we will turn to 112 and figure it out from there. Thank you very much, Counselor Mayo. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us again this year. Excuse us while we find our marker.
I didn't bring that book.
We are on page 123. Great. I think now we're ready to join you as well. So again, same as last year, it's very informal. It's just a chance for us to learn a little bit about what's going on at your school this year and how it relates to Greenfield and our students.
Great. I am Rick Mott, I'm the superintendent at Franklin County Tech.
And Russ Cobras, the business manager at Franklin County Tech.
We have a short presentation pertaining to what drives our budget, and the main thing that will drive our budget is enrollment. So when we look at enrollment, we look at our staff and we try to have a match to right-size our school. And we've been doing that for the last 5 years, as we had to cut back on a shot program that we eliminated last year. This is the first year that we had not had that particular program in place. That was our business technology program, because we didn't have enough student interest in that, and we needed to cut back. And we reduced in other areas as enrollment has declined. When we look at enrollment right here, you can see our enrollment information for the last 5 years. In 2017, we have 446 enrolled students from our member towns. You can see that it went up by about 9 students from the previous year, but it hasn't recovered from the significant drop, and I don't think it's going to. And I have information that would allude me to that analysis. When we look at the total enrollment of all the students, in grade 8 across the entire county, right? I have 804 students in the blue here in 2012-13. We took 143 of those qualified students in that particular pool. The next year, as you can see, the blue dropped to 735. We took qualified students of 135. Then it dropped again to 672 in 2014-15. We took 136 in the orange. And back again, it dropped a little bit more in 2015-16 to 662. We took 132. And you can see that number up top. You'll see 19.9, 20.2, 18.4. Those are the total percentiles of the students which have come to Franklin County Tech over the years, on average. Then we had the real big drop in 2016-17 when it went all the way down to 598. We ended up with 128 students at a percentile of 21.4% of qualified students, and no qualified waiting list. Next year, 2017-18, this past year, we're at 638 or so in grade 8, and we had 126 students. As you can see, we can project now, these are the current 8th graders for next year, and we have 620. And if we look at that, we can project an enrollment of 124 total. I'll get how this breaks down to Greenfield analysis in a minute.
No worries.
And then we have 7th grade, current 7th grade, current 8th grade, current 6th grade, and current 5th grade. These are the enrollments of all of our member towns. And so we can project, if we take the average, which has been 20%, our enrollment incoming class will be about 117 in a few short years. So we're not projecting our overall enrollment to go up based on this data analysis as we continue to right-size our school. So with that as our projection, here's what we have here. Greenfield's enrollment trends. As you can see, we had 108, 123, 113, 115, 109, and then we had the drop from 109 to our current 97. All right, so we had a significant drop in the town of Greenfield. We can project, based on 25 of those graduating and 33 applications so far, we take around 85% of the population. We can safely say will be about the same next year with Greenfield. It may go up a little bit from that number, but not drastically, because I'm looking at the 33 applications so far. They do come in. We'll get 1 or 2 in June. We'll get a few in July. And they get scattered around. But so that number 97 is just an estimate based on what we have been taking as a percentage of only qualified students. When we look at where the Greenfield students are applying from, well, here's where they have come from to Franklin County Tech. These are Greenfield students that are residents of Greenfield, but they currently attend Frontier, Virtual Academy, Mohawk, the Hatchbrook School, Greenfield High School, the Greenfield Middle Academy. So that's how we got our 33. So we actually have 24 from the middle school, and the other applications came from other areas. So that just kind of breaks down that analysis a little bit more for you. As we continue that analysis, of October 1, 2017, here's how we got our 97 students. Here's where they all came from for all grade levels, not just the 8th grade on the previous screen, but this is grades 9 through 12. They have come, 60 students have come from Greenfield. The 1/3 of the other students have come from the other school districts, which we assume that they choiced into, and now are coming to Franklin County Tech, but they're still Greenfield residents. So just for that purpose of the budget, as you're taking a look at it. So that got us to that 97. And I'm sure we'll have similar numbers for next year, but that's where we're at now. Any questions on those slides so far?
No, these are very helpful. Thank you for
Okay.
putting them together.
What's the impact for the assessments on Greenfield? Well, that 97 obviously is going to drop it by negative 11.25%. So that's where the assessment would drop compared to the other school years, as you can see how they do fluctuate. And as we are a human resource industry and an enrollment industry, it's going to be triggered by the enrollment. I think another important screen for us, just so you know the profile of the students that have been coming to Franklin County Tech overall, these are the percentile of special education based on the DESE data that we have. And when we look at the percentiles, Greenfield's about 16% special ed, Pioneer's 13%, Turner's is 21%, Mohawk 20%, Frontier 17%, Maha 16%, Franklin County Tech 30.4%. Now, one of the additions in our budget this year was to have a school adjustment council. We were able to flex in that position due to retirement of another guidance position, then moving somebody over. So we were able to do it in a budget-conscious way, but we needed the need because our profile is beginning to shift. This current incoming class of grade 9 from all our member towns has equaled over 40% students on IEPs. We never have experienced that before. It changes how we're going to deliver our service, and therefore we have to look real hard at those type of situations. So we could have an enrollment that actually declines, but we have to spend more money to meet the students' needs, if that makes any sense. Okay, and I want to talk just a minute about capacity. In our regional agreement, we have a capacity clause which identifies what's our school's capacity. We have 12 shop programs. According to the Department of Education, Chapter 74, we can take 15 students per teacher in the vocational area. And if you're in the service area, like culinary arts or health or programming and web design, or cosmetology, you can take up to 20 students per teacher. When we calculate all that, our capacity is approximately 830. Why is that capacity number important? It's important to show what our quota would be for Greenfield. According to the regional agreement, if we can slide this over just a bit so you can see it, right there. I can read it off my screen, but what we're looking at, this is a quota from each of the member towns. When you look at this total number of Greenfield students, 669. When we look at the school population from all of our member towns is 2,880. When you divide that number into that number, according to the regional agreement, we get a percentile that is times by the capacity, and that equals the capacity of Greenfield would be 198. Right? And you've seen different numbers on my other slides. It said 115, you know. Way back in the day, they did have 830 at Franklin County Tech. We do not have that today. When we look at that capacity, we start to look at the 75% rule, which is outlined in the regional agreement. This basically indicates that if a member town does not reach 75% of its total quota, which in your case would be 198, we would have 149 students coming for Greenfield, right? And it says that the pupil entitlement shall be deemed to have had the enrollment in the regional school district to equal 75% of the entitlement. So we would be design capacity of the operating cost for the fiscal year. We technically, according to the regional agreement, would be charging our member towns for the percentile below that 75%. Now, we have good working relationships with our member towns. That's not something we actually practice. It's in the regional agreement. And it's worth at least taking a note of that. But it's not something that we are moving forward with. We have good collaboration with our member school districts. When we talk about collaboration, we're talking about the access for our 8th grade students, the ability for our students from all of our member towns. We are a member town school of Greenfield, and we look at ourselves very much like that. So when we look at the 8th graders that had that opportunity for vocational technical education, they have the ability to come to our school and be able to explore it as part of their learning. And a lot of the students won't choose it, a lot of the students will choose it, but that's an opportunity that Greenfield offers. And those type of partnerships allow us to keep a positive collaboration. And so with that, moving forward, I'm going to turn the budget aspect over to our business manager, Russ Cobras.
Okay, so I'll fly through this section now that he got done with the enrollment talk, and it'll give you a little background on what's happening budget-wise. Just for picture purposes, I've got a pie chart up on the screen that displays in different colors what we get for revenue sources in our total budget. The big blue piece is what we rely on from our local town assessments, so that's local taxpayer dollars. The red pieces of the pie chart are the various types of state aid, Chapter 70 aid and transportation aid. And we drew a little Pac-Man picture on there because as a rural school, I know you've heard lots about rural schools in the last several years, even though the state holds us harmless with some of the state aid because of declining enrollments, and as best as we're trying to shift our costs and shrink our costs to right-size our school to our revenue sources, it still comes out that town assessments are growing. So they're eating more of the piece of the pie. So that's that representation. These are a lot of numbers on the screen. This is also in the budget book. It's the budget summary page, and it just lets you know that Russ knows how to balance a budget. So the top half of the screen is $10.9 million in revenues. Bottom half of the screen are the functional categories of school expenditure classifications that DESE has us use, and the $10,992,000, or just shy of $11 million up top, equals the uses of funds down bottom. And just a quick note, the assessments to our member towns this year went up on average 3%. Across all our 19 member towns. Greenfields went down because your enrollment went down, as Rick had explained earlier, but on average, town assessments went up 3%. Our total budget went up just shy of 5%. So our budget has grown a little bit. The assessment to towns has stayed pretty steady. I think for the last 15 or so years, we've stayed in the 2% to 3% range. We've had a couple of years that were outliers, both a little bit higher than that and a little bit lower than that. But I think we're right on our average. There's also in the budget book a page that'll explain your individual town assessment. It has things like the minimum contribution, which is the state formula for net school spending, for what you're required to spend on schools, on Franklin County Tech School in this case. It has the additional assessments that we would assess Greenfield for transportation and other above net school spending costs. And an interesting thing to note on the far right column of the spreadsheet is we put in the assessment per pupil per our member towns. Our average assessment is about $13,004 per pupil. Greenfield is below average for us. So you're getting assessed $11,882 compared to some of our towns which are up over $17,000. Again, all of that assessment per pupil is driven by the state net school spending formula. The richer the town, the higher the burden is on the local taxpayer to pay for those students, and theoretically, the poorer the town, the less for per pupil assessments. And just a 4-year trend, another page in your budget book is a 4-year trend of what your assessments have done. Rick covered this pretty heavily in the previous screens, and it just, again, lets you know that assessments for you have dropped for about roughly 11%, which is close to the enrollment drop for you all too. And just a note, I don't have a slide for this screen, but again, we try to benchmark ourselves in many different ways, because how do you know if you're doing good or bad as a school if you're not benchmarking against other schools or other data that pertain to education? So when we look at our school and the rest of the schools in Franklin County, I think you've got two of the best schools as far as cost efficiencies represented here tonight in Greenfield Public Schools and in Franklin County Tech. We on average spend, both our schools, Franklin County Tech's about 27% above net school spending. So net school spending is the fictional, theoretical, magic amount that the state says you should be spending per pupil. Nobody, or very few towns, cities or towns, spend at that actual rate. Everyone's usually a bit over. So we're at about 27% over. Greenfield Public Schools is 29% over. But if I look at some of the other schools in the county and across the state, some of the other schools in our county, there's a school that's 100% over, so exactly double net school spending. And other schools are somewhere in between. So I just want to take a chance to point that out. We try to benchmark ourselves, and I'm sure Greenfield Public Schools does the same thing. You benchmark yourselves to how you're doing to other schools, how you're doing to the statewide average. Statewide average for spending above net school spending is about 21%. So 21% over statewide average. We're about 27, 29%, your two schools. There are many, many schools that are much higher than that average, and obviously you've got your urban schools that are probably pretty close to actual net school spending. So I just wanted to point that out. Didn't have a chance to get that on Rick's display, and that pretty much summarizes, I've got one more slide, and it's also a page in your budget book, is this fiscal 2019 is our first year that we're going to be assessing a capital assessment. So if you were on the city council a few years ago, we had a district-wide vote. All our towns voted in the affirmative for us to carry out some capital projects. Next year, we're estimating debt service of about $185,000 will be due, and Greenfield's share of that debt service will be in the neighborhood of $43,700. And I say neighborhood of is we're not going to know the interest rates until we actually close on the loan, and the bond closing date is in September, this upcoming September. So when we present 2020 budget and beyond, we'll know the exact figures for debt service, but Rick and I took a pretty conservative estimate. We don't think your debt service will exceed the $43,700 that we've got in the chart, and that has been our suggestion to member towns, is use our figure or round it up if you're going to round it all. And that pretty much summarizes the financial end of the Franklin County Tech picture.
Great. I have a question regarding the 75% operating cost rule.
Yeah.
When was that drafted? And then
1976.
And because it almost seems like it doesn't make sense anymore, because the overall change is that there's less students to go around,
Right.
it seems like.
Sure.
Is there any, it sounds like you don't really pertain to it that much, but has there been any discussion?
We have never pertained to it.
Yeah.
It is just in our regional agreement. It is something that I thought showed our due diligence to try to reach out and be collaborative with our member towns.
And here's something to consider. We do have 19 towns. And Greenfield is way below the cap. We have towns that are 100% or even more. So we do get pressure from some of those smaller towns who are at that end of, are we carrying more than our fair share of the weight versus some of the other towns? That's the only reason why we've started to go back to the district agreement, because we'll get questions from those towns geez, we exceeded our capacity. How can you take more students than the original district agreement said you could take? Well, also in the agreement is any excess capacity from the other member towns can shift to you as a town if you need it. So we can accept more than the per capita for those towns. So we've got a handful of towns on that side, many towns on the side that Greenfield's on, but there is potential for somebody to really read the district agreement and start to make some waves on that. So that's why we thought we were going to address this with our school committee, with the towns as well, as we go along and say, here's, you know, transparency and information. Here's what the district agreement says. We've gone on as best we can, as all other schools have in this area, as far as declining enrollment, but there is that in there. So
Yeah,
it's just
because your total enrollment now, is it 446?
That's correct.
And so the district agreement at 830, it just seems like that could be quite a burden for Greenfield to bear if, it seems like the numbers are off, so perhaps
and
looking
you would
into
have
that
many
might be
other towns
worthwhile.
in the
yeah.
same, in
Yeah.
the same,
Yeah.
in the same vein. We've used some of this data because, like Rick said, we had actually closed down a shop last year.
Yeah.
So we went from 13 to 12.
13 and 12, and some of our smaller towns are more impacted, so we need to explain what was in the regional agreement to them,
Yeah.
and we just
And
wanted.
so that lowered the actual capacity of the school down to 830, believe it or not. I mean, if we were trying to get it down to the 75, where the 75% rule became real active, we'd probably be cutting our school in half as far as
Right.
shop offerings, which I don't think, you know, anyone wants to see. But it's just interesting to know that that information is in the agreement, and as some towns look at the quota, we just felt it fair that everyone should know what the data
It
is.
certainly would make it a less viable school.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, we've got, it was painful to just shrink it from 13 to 12, you know.
Yeah.
So,
It just seems like maybe 1976 was a while ago and the world's changed. I think folks are waiting longer to have children and having less children, so it might behoove the communities to relook at that agreement.
Yep.
1976, I was negative 10 years old. And I just have one more question. What is the difference between minimum contribution and the actual assessment? So what is that minimum?
okay, minimum contribution is the state's formula. So the state looks at every town and determines your ability to pay for education. Looks at half the formula is based on your property values of your town. So equalized valuation goes into that for any assessors in the crowd. And then the other half of the equation in the state formula is the amount of pay we as citizens of Greenfield earn ourselves. So they use wage factors plus the wealth factors, and then they come up with a formula, they put it into this magic box and come up with a formula that says, okay, for a town with the wealth of Greenfield, your minimum contribution is X. You can't drop below that, state law, and it all came about through education reform in a Supreme Court case back in the 1990s. So minimum contribution, and that's why our per pupil costs, but we have 19 towns, fluctuate greatly.
I see.
We've got some towns that'll have, like I said, that's 17,000 per pupil, you're about 12,000 per pupil, and the difference is the state formula. Supposedly they've got the capacity to pay more locally for those
Great, thank you.
students.
Counselor Sund.
Overall, you know, as far as education-wise, compared to like Greenfield and Mohawk and everything, as grades, you know, the allowable grades, you know, what they take out, you know, what they promote as far as science and everything, you know. Student-wise, what is the grade level like? You know, like your math and science and, you know, economic, you know,
Right.
and the computer and stuff like that.
Sure, we have the core academic curriculum that includes the math, English, science, social studies, electives, and things on that nature. We are held to the same accountability standards as every other public high school according to the MCAS, so our students are required to be able to pass MCAS in order to receive a high school diploma, just like every other school. We have, we are a level 2 school district according to the state, which fits in well with many of the other schools in the area as well, and those do vary pretty much based on your growth percentile in various categories. We don't pretend to be the college prep high school that Greenfield and Mohawk and Frontier and Pioneer and Mahar and some of these other schools are. We offer all the core subjects that can provide some students with that opportunity to move on to a 4-year or 2-year college. And then we do try to address that high percentage of special needs that you saw on the screen. So we are offering a lot of support for a lot of our kids so that they can pass the MCAS, so that they can obtain their high school diploma. And we've been very successful in that regard, even as compared to other schools. So we've done very well. We are a partner school with Greenfield, so we look at them in that, right under that umbrella.
Because I had a son that graduated in 1997, and he got a lot out of tech school. You know, that as far as like took up carpentry, and he did the teachers there, you know, in maths and everything, helped him get through his school, where he probably got more education then, but different schools, like Greenfield, Frontier, and them, they're, years ago, Greenfield had their own carpentry, and before the tech school started, when I was in school, but that was only a couple of years ago. But it seems like the tech school that way has grown, and so has the education. The other schools have grown too.
Yeah, it's
even
always
though the population has declined per students, because when I graduated, there was quite a few more than graduate now, in all the schools combined.
Yeah, I think that, just to make a quick point of that, is it's challenging at times academically when you have 1 week on and then the whole next week, those students are in their vocational trade. So in order for them to gain the sufficient growth to be able to pass the MCAS exam when you're going through your academics every other week, we had to be pretty creative in how we are offering our courses. You know, some of these kids have to double up on some of the courses, and we have some math offerings right during their shop week. So we're trying to help our students be able to accomplish those career and college readiness type of goals to be able to meet that need.
Councilor Mayo?
I just want to say, for the record, 1976 was not that long ago. That was my first year at Franklin County Tech School. I'm a 78 graduate of Franklin County Tech School in computer operations.
Oh, okay.
Nice to know.
Nice to know.
For policy, it is a long time ago. However, and I was just curious if you could share a little bit about the breakdown between graduation rates, like how many kids go on to trade assignments versus if others seek out higher education.
Those do fluctuate drastically from year to year, depending on the profile of that particular graduating class. I'll use last year as a better example because it's a lot more recent.
Yeah.
We generally have about 30% of the students that will go on to some sort of academic higher education opportunities. We have approximately 40% to 50% that will go right into the world of work, whether that be in advanced machining or carpentry or what have you. And then we have that group in the middle. Some go off to the armed services. Some do a little half and half as far as their work and their continuing education. Some go to tech colleges like Lincoln Tech and Vermont Tech and some of the tech colleges that are in the area to enhance the skills that they've already been developing. So it does pretty much vary, and we'll have some years where we'll have 15-20% go on to a 4-year college or 2-year college, and then the very next year it's about 30%. So it does vary drastically depending on the graduating class.
And just a follow-up, and what does that look like for perhaps counselor, I don't know what were they called, career counselors
Yeah.
or what have you, guidance counselors?
Yeah, we have our career
This has
counselors
been
in
a long time for me.
various type of avenues. Our career counselors do work with our vocational and academic
Yeah.
instructors, and we have a co-op coordinator that tries to get our students out into the world of work. We have about 110 seniors, and half of those seniors are out there working every other week earning a paycheck.
Cool.
And that's really exciting for us, so that's another thing that I believe contributes to the community in which they live, and they're out there trying to earn a paycheck. They come back the next week, and they're right back in academics. So it's quite a transition for them as well. So we have really enhanced that portion of the program. That takes a lot of collaboration with the guidance department as well, where they're trying to do a lot of the outreaches.
That's fine. I'm a graduate of a cooperative college, but the more tradespeople we can get, the world will be a better place, because right now, as you know, there's less and less around.
Sure.
Yeah, and then I guess my last question would be, and we asked this of all our schools, if you had a dream budget item that you could just buy and pay for, what would that be?
Great question. I'm glad I have a job and I don't have to interview for one and get that one. I would really want to focus on student support. If I had a dream budget, it would be enough resources to adequately provide the instruction that all our students would require. If we're in a classroom of 25 kids and we have a paraprofessional as a support, there's 7 or 8 other kids that don't even get seen during that whole entire 56 minutes. So, I mean, if I could have 3 or 4 more in each of those areas, that would be wonderful. If I could have in our shops, which is really designed for safety, so when we have 2 instructors and we got kids working independently and it's hard to keep everyone exactly supervised, I'd like to add a few more teachers there too. So mine would be into faculty. I would probably invest a lot of money. If you were to give me an extra $1 million, I would definitely invest it into our staff.
Great.
To support our teachers.
Thank you very much.
To support our students.
Good answer.
Not to make it a hot seat, but.
Yep.
And I think Rick is being a little bit modest. He actually worked after school safety is a big issue, obviously, with the various shootings and things going on. And Rick, after Columbine, he was working in a different district on the eastern part of the state. And you were doing something pretty unique back then with both the guidance counselor, adjustment counselors, and people looking at kind of being proactive and looking at the types of students that were high risk and actually working with those students before it became a huge issue. And I think if we had funds, that we could apply without the budget being a constraint, that's a way to go too, because if the more proactive we get, the more counseling we get, and these students have a place to go to unburden themselves, then we're not talking about the tragedy at the end. And you had, he shared this with me only a month or 2 ago. I never knew this about him, but they had actually worked with state police profilers and really looked at the high-risk students and then drew those students in and worked with them.
I'm from the Boston area. You can't tell by my accent.
But it is fascinating because more and more online institutions are able to detect, I say high risk, but high risk for dropout rate, right? So everything's digitized and those algorithms make that easy for you. But wouldn't it be wonderful if there was some way to input and there was an algorithm to help us identify those students? But
Yeah, I agree.
someday.
We're not there yet.
Thank you very much, gentlemen,
Thank you.
for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Moving right along, virtual school. And that is in our budget books under, I don't know, probably backwards.
Say anything, but
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is the virtual school in there? I'm not finding it.
I'm not seeing it.
Hi.
Hi.
Mayor Martin, if it's not under, in the school area, where would the virtual school be located in the budget book?
We are not part of the Greenfield
Oh,
Public
I
Schools,
see.
so you would not find budget
Is that in
pages.
miscellaneous?
It used to be.
Yes,
Evidently, it has taken.
So
right.
is that under miscellaneous in our budget book?
No, there is no.
Oh, there's no page?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Judith, for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, just some things that are a little bit different about us from last year. First thing is that we were at one point in time called the Massachusetts Virtual Academy at Greenfield Commonwealth Virtual School, which became a rather cumbersome mouthful. We have had our certificate amended and changed the name to Greenfield Commonwealth Virtual School, period. So it's
Wonderful.
a little shorter. GCVS is a whole lot easier
It's important
to put
for
out
branding,
than
it is.
Better flow to it.
Absolutely. The reason why we are not in the budget book is because in 2014, this became a Commonwealth virtual school, so we are directly accountable to the Commonwealth
I see.
through the
should know
Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So our funding comes from them. People who send students, the money is assessed to the towns through the school choice formula. So it is contingent on the number of students enrolled within the school, and those assessments happen on the municipal side of the budget, so.
Great. Now it all makes sense, and I should have remembered that from last year, so I apologize.
It's a lot to keep in your heads, so. Currently, we have 608 students, and the one-pager kind of gives you a lay of the land in terms of where they come from. We service 156 different towns across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. In students K through 12, we are fully online, so there is no brick-and-mortar schoolhouse for us. So the education is delivered in the home, but it is delivered by Massachusetts licensed teachers. We used to get our curriculum and all of our learning management systems from K-12 Incorporated. We have severed that relationship with them and are now using a product called Canvas, which is a learning management system, and then we purchase content from a variety of other content providers that are aligned with Massachusetts curriculum frameworks. We have taken on all of our own operations as a result. We did that for two reasons. One was educational, because the curriculum was not fully aligned with the expectations for learning in Massachusetts, and the second was financial. We just were at a point where we could not afford the fees that were being charged. So it was the fiscally prudent thing to do, to sever that relationship and to move on. So that's what we have done. So we do provide a full curriculum for all of our students in K through 12, English language arts, math, science, social studies, art, music, health and wellness, physical education, which is interesting. Our teachers do a combination of online lessons that students actually sit in class through a client called Zoom. So there's actually a class that students have, and they vary throughout the day and throughout the week. And then there are assignments that the students do offline and then submit into their teachers that they grade. So it's a little bit of both live lessons as well as work that they do. Parents play a significant role in our school because they are what we call the learning coach for the child. So they are the ones that are sort of facilitating what's going on in the home environment when the child is not in class. So we have a real strong partnership with families. Currently, there are 12 students from Greenfield who attend GCVS as students. So, and then the rest are sprinkled about across the state. One of the things that we are looking at doing, just knowing how fiscally tight things are, is the potential for being able to partner with brick and mortar districts like Greenfield or any other district for that matter, to be able to do some blended learning opportunities so that child could stay in their home district. We might be able to provide some things that, particularly in small rural districts where advanced placement courses or those kinds of things are difficult to offer, that we might be able to be helpful to districts and be a cost-effective solution for them. So that is an avenue that we're starting to explore as well. So I'm open to any other questions you have.
It's very exciting because every year that you do come and spill, this is the second year we've invited you, but even last year, everything's so it's changing all the time, it's growing all the time, and so I think that's wonderful. And I think I shared my own personal story of how wonderful it would have been to have a virtual academy back. I broke my leg in high school and I was homeschooled through a tutor provided by Greenfield Public Schools. He was wonderful. He was a wonderful tutor, but I had a broken leg, so it was really hard to arrange meetings, and when being in a virtual classroom might have been more efficient for my junior year of high school. I don't have, do you have any questions, anyone?
I do have one.
Councilor Mayo.
You spoke about blended opportunities in the future with basically cooperating with brick and mortar schools. How far in the future are you talking about?
Our hope is we're in the process of trying to put together kind of a needs assessment survey particularly for schools in Western Massachusetts, because we know that the fiscal impacts of declining enrollments and declining resources have really hit a lot of rural schools in the valley and west very hard. So we're in the process of putting together a way to assess what the needs are and how we might be able to be helpful. From that assessment would then have to go a request to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to get our certificate amended so that we could offer that. That's not part of the current operating certificate that we've been given by the department. So it's hopeful that maybe by second semester of next year we might be able to look at some of that as a result. So.
I got a follow-up.
Sure, right on.
So you said there are 12 students from the Greenfield area?
Yes.
By and large, what is that a high percentage? Is that a medium percentage? We have 351 towns in the Commonwealth.
Right.
What percentage has the highest student? What town do you know?
Springfield and Worcester are about tied right now for percentage-wise of students. They're in the, I want to say that they're probably, numbers-wise, they're, let's put it this way. Percentage-wise, it's probably about equal. Numbers-wise, it's larger.
Okay.
Okay, let's put it that way.
And I was just curious if, I don't see a figure here, but if you're aware of your assessment per pupil?
Per pupil, currently it is $6,625. It has not changed since the Commonwealth Virtual Schools were established back in 2013, 2014. The State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education did relook at that number this past year. Next year it will be $8,190.
I'm sorry, 8,000?
$190 per student. But that's after really no increase. So.
Yeah.
We are grateful. We serve a niche population of students. We have a lot of students with social anxiety or kids who have been bullied. We have some medically fragile students who for chemotherapy or those kinds of things. And then we've got aspiring athletes and artists that are trying to either become qualified for Olympics who are out competing and training and that kind of thing. As a matter of fact, we just picked up a new family from the eastern part of the state with a fourth grader who's very interested in theater, and we're working around a touring schedule out with Annie right now. So we also have to bring MCAS testing to the children. It's not like a school where you bring the kids into a room and you test them. So we're currently, as a matter of fact, I was out of town monitoring some tests myself today because we are sprinkled across the state right now trying to do MCAS tests. So this one student, because of her touring schedule, she's going to do a makeup test. So, we can offer that kind of flexibility. So we're really a niche school for a particular type of student who can benefit from this. We are not a school necessarily for every child. And some kids come in and they haven't had success in brick and mortar. They flourish with us. Other kids come in and realize that this is a different kind of environment where they really have to be responsible, self-directed learners, and some students are really not ready for that, and so they go back to brick and mortar. So we have a lot of in and out with students just by that very nature. Population-wise, we are above the state percentage-wise in terms of Poverty, our poverty level is 52% free and reduced lunch. Our special education percentage is 22%. The state is around 17%, so we do have a higher percentage of kids who are in need. So the extra boost that the state board has given us is going to help us be able to put some resources towards addressing the needs of a high at-risk population. So we're grateful for that.
And I'm happy you mentioned that. So when a student is at a disadvantage and food insecure, how is a virtual school helping them provide meals, or?
We don't, but what it does is it helps us be able to offer more tutoring services. We get the benefit of federal grants for Title I, so that drives that funding. We also do for students who have demonstrated financial needs. We will provide supports in a small reimbursement towards their internet service so that they can access the curriculum during the year. So that's how we can be helpful to them.
That's great. Any other questions?
Nope.
Sam, thank you so much for
Oh, you're
joining
welcome.
us today.
You're welcome. Thank you. And by the way, 1976 was not that long ago. That was the year I graduated from college. So,
All right, I'm outnumbered here, I get it.
so I didn't want you to feel too badly.
I'm not.
Oh, he's just razzing me, it's fine.
Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
I wouldn't rattle you.
I'm just the one with the most prominent microphone. Without further ado, Superintendent Harper.
So we have a bit of a tech issue. I don't think we're going to be able to project to you, but we can share some information with you.
We have our budget book, so
I'm
we
sure you
can
can project.
speak
We
to
were
it.
hoping to be able to share some additional information. Turn it this way so you can see.
We are, for those of you following along at home, just like no one's watching at home. Let's see. So your vision statement here is at 112, and our information for public school enrollment begins on 113. And I guess it's a good place to start talking about goals and objectives for this upcoming school year.
All right, so thank you for taking the time to spend an evening talking about my favorite subject in the world, education. As a parent and as an educator, there's nothing better that we can spend our time doing than developing the future. So thank you for spending your time on it tonight. I think you've heard a little bit tonight about the situation of declining enrollments, which many districts are facing across the Commonwealth. In Greenfield, that has not been our situation, and we have found that our population has been steady, if not increasing. So you've heard about the development of a budget, and one of the main things that's guiding the school committee budget for next year is the projected increase in enrollment. Right now, today, our enrollment is right around 1,754. That's up every day. It continues to increase. Sometimes 3 students enroll in a day, sometimes more. It changes. And we're projecting 1,835 next year. So there's a good uptick. You heard a little bit, too, about how students enroll in the tech school, and that number is not exact. It's hard to project at this point in the year, but not all of the students that enroll from Greenfield are coming out of the Greenfield Public Schools enrollment because they might have been previously counted, as you heard, in, for example, a school choice to another district, or they could have moved into Greenfield but been in another district previously. So even though they're in the tech school count, they're not coming out of the Greenfield Public Schools Foundation enrollment. So looking at next year, our foundation enrollment is 1,964 students. And our budget planning process aligns to our strategic plan. So when you talk about our vision and our mission, when we do our budget process, it's centered around the goals and objectives of our schools, and our budget is a values document that serves to drive the mission forward. Most of the increases in the budget that have been put forward are around salary and contractual obligations, and that's around 55%. Some increases are in the area of special education, which continues to be an area where we have state mandates and obligations. In this particular budget cycle, we have also been indicated from the state that we need to increase services to English language learners. We do have a growing population of English language learners. have a pretty graph here, which you can't see, that compares the FY18 budget in 2018, obviously, to 2019. And the superintendent's budget from those 2 years actually decreased from 2018 to 2019. The reason that's important is because obviously our costs have gone up. Our fixed costs go up. It costs more to do the same thing that you did this year, next year. And even with that, in this year's superintendent's budget, it's actually less than previous years. And that's because we have an eye towards the community and to be good stewards of our financial resources and to create as I was going to say slim a budget, as lean a budget as possible. But doing that means that we're continuing to use more reserves. And one of the themes that you'll see is the need to create a stable budget that is not just good for this year, but years in the future. The budget cycle this year was slightly increased at the school committee level and then decreased in the mayor's proposal by just over $800,000. And there was a question tonight about per pupil spending. And in the Greenfield Public Schools, we're right around the state average. So over the last 3 years, it goes up and down, both the state average and Greenfield. But in FY17, the last complete year on record, the state average was $15,956 per student, and Greenfield was $15,212. So below the state average for per pupil spending. We are looking at about $13.5 million in projected local aid. That's money coming from the state to supplement or to build the aid in this year's budget. So about $12.2 million in Chapter 70, an estimated $600,000 in circuit breaker, which is for extraordinary special education, and about $156,000 in charter tuition, and we expect just under $600,000 in school choice, right around $575,000. One of the main things that we're looking for is to be able to add teachers that address our enrollment increase because we have more students coming in. So we need to add teachers where we just don't have enough classroom teachers. For example, at Federal Street School, we need to add a classroom teacher. This year, we really pushed the limits of class size. We added an extra paraprofessional to a classroom where we really would have liked to have been able to add a whole nother classroom teacher. And what we find is that when our class sizes become very large, it becomes hard to address the individual needs of students. And in some cases, that becomes not only a sort of fiscally, it becomes a bad choice for the student and a bad choice financially, because those students in some cases end up needing more supports than if they just had the individualized attention of the teacher in the first place. The real focuses of the next year's budget that we would like to see are mental health supports, psychology, classroom teacher, special educators, and English language learners. These are the areas in which we know we need to better support our students. We have not added very much in the way of administration. There's a modest increase of less than a half of a position that we were restoring from previous years. The bulk of this is supporting mental health and behavioral health. There's been a lot of discussion about the use of the reserves in the school department budget. As I said, we need to balance the spending in the school department with being able to project multiple years and know that we will be in good shape for many years to come to ensure that the district is in a good position. And to do this, we have policies that the school committee has set that help us guide how much money we keep and carry over from year to year and how much we spend down. So the budget that we have right now was developed with that in mind. Because there's a significant gap between the school committee budget and the mayor's budget, one question is, well, could you just spend down your reserves? Right now, there's maybe $2.4 million of reserves currently, quote, available in the school department budget. Of that, over 1.8 million has already been earmarked into the FY19 budget, is already spoken for, and is already going to be spent in the FY19 budget. So when the idea of spending down reserves comes up, I have to ask the question, how long can spending down reserves produce a viable budget? And is that the right solution? So instead we look to cutting positions to make sure that we can move forward in a way that's sustainable. And that means that classroom teachers and instructional assistants, we don't renew. When they retire, we don't replace them, and then we're unable to hire the new people that we have identified due to state mandates or increased enrollment that we really, really, truly need to hire. I would like to just talk briefly about Choice In. Choice In is a really great way for students in surrounding districts to take advantage of what we have to offer in Greenfield. We have terrific programs, excellent academics, beautiful facilities, and a number of our neighboring districts choose to send their children to school right here in Greenfield, even if they don't live here. 100% of the seats that we have available are filled this year. The way those seats are set is that every year the school committee votes to set a certain number of seats, and there's a cap on how many children we can enroll, and there's a lottery. So if we have, using a round number, if we had 10 seats available and 15 students enrolled, we would have a lottery for which 10 students get in. So we can't, school choice generates revenue, but we are maxed at the number of seats that are available to us. And this year, we expect that to be around $575,000 of revenue that comes to the district that supports those programs that attract those students.
Can we, before you move on, can we talk about school choice seats a little bit more? So the school committee sets the amount. Do they set it by, I don't know, like we heard from the tech school that they look at how many shops they have and they multiply a number. How does the school committee derive the school choice seats?
Exactly. It's by school and by grade level.
Okay.
So the principals look at this year's kindergarten might have 20 students while they're going to be in first grade next year, if there are any retentions or move-ins, and then they identify how many seats they might be available. We know, though, that there will be more students that are moving to Greenfield, and we have to save seats for Greenfield residents, and a certain amount of movement during the year. And so what's left is a very small number of seats that are already in the classroom and are available, and we can allow a student from another district to come and sit in that seat. And those are the school choice seats. We present those to the school committee and have a discussion about the sustainability of those seats and so forth. It's very clear that we cannot add extra teachers for school choice.
Right.
And so we've followed that very closely.
Thank you. Oh, Counselor Sund.
Since the new high school and everything, the more offering you have at the high school, has it grown for people, students wanting to come to Greenfield instead of going other places?
Yes. Now that the school choice seats are opened at Greenfield High School, there's been a positive trend of students that both stay in from the middle school to the high school, but also students from neighboring district that choose to attend as a school choice student at the high school level. And some of them are also very talented athletes. So we've had students that come to Greenfield, choice into Greenfield, bring with them a high quality of academics that is an appropriate fit for our high school, but also bring with them a love of sport. And so it's kind of a win-win.
I think we're all set.
So just talking a bit about balancing to this budget, because the amount of the gap between the school committee budget and the mayor's budget is significant. I know that's not the focus of the budget book as it's in front of you, but the school committee, budget and finance subcommittee are in the process of weighing in on what those modifications might look like. I'm aware that the council would like to see some specific information about what the schools would do if there were other funds available to supplement this, which is allowable by charter. And so we're preparing that information to have available to the council.
I have no questions.
So I apologize again for the display, and I'd be happy to email this out if
Oh, yeah,
you'd like.
that'd be great if you could, and just email it to the clerk and she can send it to all of us.
That sounds great.
I have some questions. I guess while we're still on school choice, or we were on school choice, so we're anticipated earning $571 and some odd dollars. What are we spending for choice out right now?
Do you have that?
It's about $2.3 million, I believe, roughly.
And then my other question was, there was some discussion during operating budget discussion about repairs to North Parish School, and then about the preschool program. Are you seeing, or are you keeping track of any research of perhaps, is this an early way to bring in students to Greenfield and keep them in the pipeline? I think you might have, or Adrian might have addressed where drop-offs are happening. That's probably around 5th grade. But are you seeing any evidence that students who start in the preschool program tend to stay in Greenfield?
Yes, we know both through the enrollment and through anecdotally through families. The opposite is also true, and in fact, there's an increased need in this 0 to 3 range, as well as the 3 to 5-year-old. When it's a natural habit, when a parent brings their child to an environment and they become comfortable in it, they gain friendships, they become accustomed to the community, they meet other parents, and then they become a part of that environment. So we want that to happen here in Greenfield. People have had a very positive experience at the Academy of Early Learning, and because of it, parents meet other parents, children get to know the quality of our staff and our programs, and then they tend to stay here in Greenfield.
Yeah, because I think there was some comment made that perhaps there is no state funding for that. It's something that we front. But I think it's a worthwhile investment if it creates a pipeline of students staying in district. And like you said, it's all about those relationship buildings. So thank you.
It's a combination of funding, and it depends on how your model for pre-K is, how it is funded by the state. So we do have some typical peers and some other students in the school, and there's different levels of funding from the state for those different sort of types of eligible students. So certainly we do pay with tuition for that program as well, with parents funding into the program.
And I guess this is, you're on TV, you're live, so if you could talk about enrollment for the preschool program, so if there are parents listening, I can share with parents, what is that process like, what are the tuition fees, and what are the days like?
Well, we're already full, so I might like to talk more about
for 2020.
For 2020, for those of you planning to have a child in the next 3 years. No, as I said, this is a very well-regarded program. We have both AM and PM program, and then we have a full-day program. We accept children that are ages 3 to 5 at the North Parish building. I think our information, our tuition is all on our website, but the best thing is to go to the school. Ashley Walsh is the tuition coordinator at the building. You can talk to our registrar, Lisa McGinnis. We find that parents, it's not so much the information, it's getting the foot in the door and meeting, seeing who's there. As a parent myself, I know that you want to see who's going to be with your children. And when people come to the Academy of Early Learning or any of our schools, they feel that their child is safe. And I think seeing it for yourself is worth quite a lot.
And a follow-up to that about the school building, is there, some of my colleagues seem to think that there's some shift in the buildings where the Academy may or may not be next year. Is it pretty set at North Parish School? I know there's some questions about the Green River School and what's going on there.
The school committee has jurisdiction over the use of the building, so they're in discussion about the use of the Green River School building for next year. To my knowledge, there hasn't been a serious proposal to move the Academy of Early Learning from North Parish to Green River School. I don't see the benefit to moving an existing program that's doing well, and I haven't heard significant consideration of that particular move, so parents can rest assured.
And Councilor Sund?
Yes, like my grandkids went from over in Turner's to the school over there and moved into Greenfield into Four Corners, and they have learned a lot by going into Four Corners, and they really are learning through the whole education there in Four Corners, and like my granddaughter, she can't wait to go into middle school because she's like say a student helper teacher right now. And through this, I think the students learn a lot get a lot out of the schools because some students learn more than others and are willing to help. And that way the teachers ask them to help the other students, and it can go on throughout the rest of the school. Because I think it's good to have the teachers that are willing to pass it on to the students. And I see that happen in Greenfield.
Thank you. You're right, we really encourage responsibility and independence, and a number of our students, if you gave them a choice between a number of activities, maybe they've had some free time or they've earned it after completing a project, they would often choose to help. In your granddaughter's case, maybe she wants to come and help in the superintendent's office since we're right downstairs from the middle school. I would welcome that.
I might know another 10-year-old that would want to do that. And I'm just trying to do the math in my head, and perhaps you can help me understand. It's probably not simple math at all. But so if choicing in is full, yet choicing out is more expensive, can you help us understand where that discrepancy is coming from?
Sure. So a couple pieces, and please feel free to chime in. One thing is that once students, first I'd like to say that we're seeing a positive trend of students continuing to choice into Greenfield, and fewer students each year are leaving in that particular year to choice out.
Right.
So, which is positive. It means students are staying here, and Greenfield is seen as a destination for academics. Having said that, if a student left at any point in the past, they continue their schooling elsewhere, and so we have to pay an increment called sending tuition for those school choice students who have gone to another district. Even if they made that decision 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they're still a choice out student. So there's a price tag associated with that. And across the Commonwealth, this is a real challenge because you're sending money to another district, and yet you're responsible for educating the students, and it's a real burden on cities and towns. So that number, as it continues to climb, is really something to contend with. It sort of forces a competitive environment as well, because you're getting some funds for students that are coming in, but of course you're paying for students that are going out. And it's not, as you can see from the numbers, it's not a, quote, winning game overall. It's a way to recoup a small fraction, in this case, about a quarter of the money that goes out, returns to the district from students coming back in.
That sounds like a very fluid number.
It is fluid in terms of students continue to come back to the district, and that tends to be a slow build. But once students, if students leave at any point, then that tends to stay fairly steady. And the calculation from the state for how much you spend on that student is what changes. Add anything to that?
No, you pretty much nailed it.
So essentially, more students are choicing out than we're able to choice in. Is that what's happening? I'm just
More
trying to
students
figure
choice
out
out
the
at some.
sending tuition. I'm just trying to figure out, like, if we're choiced, or if our choice, so our students are choicing, some of our students are choicing out, and that's a trend that we're seeing.
Or
everywhere.
have in the past.
Yeah, exactly. So they continue to not be in their
Correct.
seat in Greenfield. But then we have plenty of students coming in to take those seats. So is it a compound figure, the 2.4 million? Or?
So the other piece is enrollment, so local enrollment.
Yeah.
So because at the same time our local enrollment is increasing, so there are fewer school choice seats available to invite students into. So that's why that number being capped by the committee is important. Otherwise, we could just continue to invite more and more students in.
And that was your point, you can't hire teachers for choice.
Exactly.
I see, okay, now it makes sense.
Because now
like,
you're-
why don't we just fill that gap?
Right,
Let's
because
just get
now
them all
you're,
in.
right, if I wanted to hire Ashley Semple to be a teacher, right now we're paying a new teacher, and now you have students choicing in, and that's not, that sort of defeats the purpose of
And
it.
it also creates a messy environment overall.
And again, our goal here is sustainability long-term, and so if you have a teacher and a classroom and you have an empty seat, it makes sense to offer that up. Whereas if that classroom is full, you don't have a seat to offer.
I see. This all makes sense to me now. Thank you for following my thinking. And then I have another question about your reserves. I just want to understand that a little bit. I know the situation with the town, when it's a turn back situation where we either find grant money, we find efficiencies, folks retire. And that's how we earn our reserves. It's not that we over budgeted and then we have money left over because we were irresponsible. Is that how it works similarly with the schools when you have reserves? Is it you have found money with grants or folks retire? How do your reserves get built?
I will say it's different for each fund type and each account. Some of these have been slowly building for a period of time. You might have several lines that have $427 in this particular account, or $2,700, looking through some of the accounts. It's almost so small that it's hard to spend it in a way that's meaningful when they're in those individual lines with an individual purpose. So sometimes we let that build in that individual account until it's at a point that it might make sense. Maybe it's at a $5,000 or $10,000 cap. It might make sense to then say, okay, let's use that to purchase this. Do you want to comment more?
Yeah, I mean, the primary reserve accounts.
Could you
that we're talking
introduce yourself?
about- Sure, I'm sorry, I'm Chris Desjardins, I'm the business manager.
Hi, Chris.
The main reserves that are always being talked about would be school choice money, circuit breaker money. I mean, those are what people typically call reserve funds. And what we have in this district, and actually in most districts, is you don't use every dollar of school choice money. Again, these accounts have built up over time, and so now what we do is we budget into the next year using typically what we're taking in that year, sometimes a little more, but always retaining a little bit of that money, in the account. Again, you could go in and just wipe out the accounts, but then you'd really find yourself in trouble the following year. So the goal is always to keep whatever we made last year in these accounts still. And again, the school committee has policies that dictate how much we can carry forward. It's the same with circuit breaker money. That's money we get from the state for sped tuitions. And again, with that particular account, we can only carry over what we made the previous year. And so typically, we do try to carry over the prior year's revenue. So we're always 1 year ahead. It's really a prudent financial move. I mean, you don't want to wipe out these accounts and then find out, oh, we can't sustain. We spent all of our reserve money to hire people, and now we have no more reserve money, and we still have to pay these people. So you end up with a much more stable school district when you have this versus spending it all and laying people off the following year.
So essentially, it's your version of a stabilization account.
It is not exactly, because it's not a pocket of money that's sitting there untouched. It's not a savings account that's just sitting there waiting for a rainy day. These are reserves that, as you said, have been built slowly because of some kind of surplus or turn back from the state, or we budgeted for a certain amount of reimbursement, and then in a particular year, our Director of Pupil Services did an excellent job of recouping costs that were, owed back to the district that exceeded, typical returns. And so that's money that we can reinvest in our programming. We are spending down our accounts each year. Over the last 4 years, every single year, we have dipped into our reserves every single year. So these reserves are not increasing each year without drawing from them. Because we use an all-funds budgeting approach, we use local money to build the base of our budget, but we are also supplementing and using the school choice funds, the circuit breaker funds. So we're using some of that each and every year as it goes into the budget for critical positions. An example is if somebody comes in, a number of new students come in September, after the budget has been set, and we find that we need additional classroom teachers, we have to pull, for example, from school choice, which is very flexible in how we can use it. There aren't real restrictions on how we use school choice funds. So we can use that to meet those needs of the students that have come in, that are Greenfield residents, that need a classroom teacher right then. And we can do that without a sort of terrible, I don't know what the word is, formal rigmarole, because we're able to be responsive to those needs.
A 9/10 vote.
Formal rigmarole.
Councilor Sun.
So if the budget keeps on going, the town budget keeps on going down, you have to go into the reserve funds more.
Right.
And eventually, the reserve is blanked out.
That's right.
And so the more your budget from the town goes down, the more you have to reach into what I call a savings account, and eventually it just flattens out, and you are kind of met in the middle, and you don't have the money to draw from.
Exactly. And so this is why it's different than a stabilization account, because a stabilization account, you're not spending down. So if you had a retirement account and you were spending it down every year, pretty soon you wouldn't have a retirement account. I think people can understand that the purpose of saving for retirement is so that you have it available when you need it. Whereas right now, what we're doing is we're making a balanced use of some reserves, working with the school committee and setting thresholds for how much are we going to spend and how much are we going to retain, and being very transparent about that. So in our budget process, we try to say very clearly, here's how much we're spending from local dollars, here's how much we're spending from our school choice, here's how much we're using from special education or any other account that's available to us.
And I just have another question. So you keep talking about different accounts. Are there reserves? The reserves have several different accounts. It's a
Just
makeup
because they're different funding types.
Okay. Any other questions?
And I will say, we never, so if there was local dollars, those are never kept forward into the next year. You know, and typically, we're close to, you know, as I mentioned at the last council meeting, we're 99.9% spent at this point in the school year, and we have a whole quarter of the school year left. If there is any remaining balance at the end of the year, then what we do is we pay forward special education tuition for the next fiscal year. The last 2 years, I think we came back and asked for a supplemental budget in addition. This year, we're not doing that. We are seeking, through the school committee and the mayor, there was a discussion about seeking that 1% supplemental, but there has not been a request for additional funds. So we're working very hard, and that's when these accounts come into play. We're trying to really balance and create stability.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm just going to bring up school safety a little bit, because we're hearing a little bit from both the public safety side and the school side. And I guess my question, it's not really a question, I kind of almost want to like open it up because we didn't really have an opportunity to hear from the schools in regards to school safety. We did speak briefly with Chief Haig in regards to your budget. It's my understanding that the schools, the police, and the mayor got together and were really trying to be proactive about how to keep our students safe. And so what wound up was, we're talking about student resource officers. Where does the school stand on that plan? And I guess that's just my question, and then we'll go from there. As you can tell, I'm trying to tread lightly.
The school resource officer program is really vital to the school district in terms of our response time and our ability to keep students and staff safe. I think some of our neighboring districts are just now starting to add to their local budgets, whether police or schools, even one school resource officer. There have been areas around here that have not had any, and I think it is important that we have the school resource officer program. We have an MOU that the district attorney's office said could serve as a model for the state, because there's a focus on building relationships, on de-escalating, on not enforcing criminal action, when what we can be doing is educating students. And that's the restorative justice model that we have had in place at the high school for the last several years, and is now at the middle school. I think that's a really important program. What's difficult in this particular year is that we are sort of faced with this need to balance a budget, and that means that we have a need for teachers and mental health services, and then there's also a proposal for increasing security. Everybody is in support of increasing security. I think what's challenging is when that means that we won't be able to have a classroom teacher in front of the classroom, and the trade-off there is challenging in this particular budget cycle, but it's a question of resources.
And I'm happy that you said it is a focus on relationship building. I was a little concerned with the discussion that happened at our meeting. Was it last week? It's been a really that was a really long meeting, so it seems like it was forever ago. But my concern was that the discussion became it was almost like an us versus them with the police department versus the schools, and it is, and you said it beautifully, and I really appreciated what you said. It was because it does come down to dollars and cents where it creates this situation of who gets the money and for what. Because I was also concerned hearing the students who spoke at that meeting speak to, I guess, their fear of having cops in schools, because actually it's my experience having a resource officer was it absolutely made me feel more comfortable around the police, and I know that I'm speaking as a white female, but it is about building those relationships and building those gaps. I guess filling those gaps with the police, not as criminal enforcement, but also members of our community. And so I just wanted to say that publicly and address that that's how I feel about the situation.
Could I add something?
Sure. Yeah.
So a number of things have been sort of, I'm going to put aside the school resource officer question for a second.
Yeah.
In the last several months, there's been an intense focus on student safety. Mm-hmm. And this has brought about some really important initiatives and collaborations. So one was that, in fact, before there was national attention back in February on school safety, we had initiated what I'll call emergency planning meetings here in Greenfield. The chief of police, the fire chief, myself, and we have now added the state police and the school resource officer. So today, in my office, we had a meeting with all 5 of those individuals, and we're talking about enhanced safety measures. What can we do right now without adding any other staff? What can we do for our students today? What training measures do we need to put in place? Is it whether it's for the SRO or for the teachers? What do the parents need for training? What do the administrators need? Today we conducted a lockdown training in the central office and went through just with administrators to make sure that staff are as safe and well informed as they need to be. We have to do the common sense things that we have available to us. We're always talking about cost efficiency. We need to do what we can do right now to make sure that the simple things are done. Sometimes the common sense things are the most important, and we're doing that as well. So there's been a very important collaboration, and when these departments talk to each other, we discover things that can be potentially life-saving, and communication and coordination are really key. So I really want to express my appreciation. It's been a really coordinated effort, and police, fire, schools, town working together is going to get things done.
Right, and I guess my wish and hope is that the conversation with our public, outside of those who are in this room, would really understand that too, that when we're bringing forth discussion of SROs, this is all a plan, this is all a strategy, this is all trying to find the best way to keep our students safe, and it's not the schools versus the police department at all in this budget cycle. It's what is the best for what Greenfield and our students and our families and our community need.
And I think this came from an effort on the mayor's part too, to articulate how do we put dollars towards school safety. Mm-hmm. And this is one way to do that. And I think people have different feelings about how to do that, but the takeaway should be that the underlying goal here is to improve school safety. I think the chief and I both agree that the school resource officer program needs a close review and could use tweaking like many things could. So if there's public input and particularly student input, which is what, that's what matters to me most importantly, there are mechanisms that were in place long before this conversation to start creating these two-way feedback. So students and teachers and administration have a dialogue. And those are in place now. So we can continue to improve this program and other programs.
Thank you so much. Councilor Sun.
On that subject, one of the people that are on your school committee, we were talking, because I'm ex-military and stuff like that, and he was, I have a group of men that get together and we talk, and what happens is it stays in our group. And he was saying maybe you could get that together with the students, that they could talk about their stuff that they're afraid of, or something that they, and have different groups get together where they can know that what's said in that group stays in that. And that way they can feel safer that what's going on in their groups, and they can, have different groups in different schools where they can meet and maybe have somebody that they, older students or whatever, talk to them, and they can talk and get their problems out, so that they, they know it wouldn't go any further than the people they're talking with. And to me, that would help with having a resource officer or whatever. That would help the students learn to trust people and know that what they said would not go any further than the group they're meeting with.
I think that's a great point, and it goes back to the goals in this budget cycle, which were adding staff that can best meet these needs of students. Somebody to sit down and talk to. In today's day and age in schools, schools are very busy places. We have curriculum and standards, and teachers are expected to cover an awful lot. There's not always that time and that space, and it's really the role of a guidance counselor to have the kind of conversation where students can open up and have those kinds of conversations. To my way of thinking, it takes both. It takes the security of having a school resource officer, and it takes the background and the trained professionals with the mental health expertise to be able to address. And to your point earlier, Councillor Semple, there is no app for identifying students that have this. It takes people. It's the old-fashioned way, and it takes a connection. And if you don't have the staff or the time to know your students, you will never know. But if in our schools, we met with every single administrator and we said, let's identify any student who isn't connected, and let's focus on getting that student a connected student. And that's what our goal is.
Thank you. And so let's turn to the deficit from your request to the mayor's, allocated budget. So that's $828,956 less than what the school committee requested. And so diving into that a little bit and your discussion about funds being made available. So what's going on with the 820,000 missing? So what are you going to have to reconsider in your budget? And and then your reserves are something like, I'm sorry, you said your reserves were, I can't find the number, 2.4 or something similar to that. So that's not what you want to happen, is spending reserves to pay for your operating budget. So what's going to happen in that case?
Right, so the reason we don't want to spend reserves is not because we want to put money aside in a pile. It's not that case at all. It's because hiring people only to let them go next year or mid-year makes no sense. It's not productive. It's not a good use of funds. And so what we're trying to do is be strategic. We have identified a few areas where we might be able to find pockets, and we would like to be able to offset, because what has been put forward, this isn't a wish list. This is a critical enrollment need. You have new students coming in with a projected enrollment increase. We have to add teaching staff. That's not the same number of children. It's adding more students in. So we need to meet those needs, and we're going to do that. We deliver a balanced budget every year, and we will do so this year. With a budget that's primarily staff and salary, that does mean staff reductions. It means teacher layoffs. It means the paraprofessionals you heard Mr. Martin talking about. Sometimes one instructional assistant in a classroom isn't enough. If he had his way, he would have several in every classroom. 2 teachers, you heard him say, isn't enough in a shop. He wishes he had 3 or 4. We don't have 2 teachers in a classroom. We usually just have 1, but you get a sense of the level of student need very quickly, and it's not just in shop. So we are looking at where we can eliminate positions because somebody's retiring or leaving. Those are positions that are needed, but we're considering cutting and not refilling those positions. We're reducing the number of paraprofessionals, instructional assistants. Many of these are required by law because they're in a student's individualized education plan. So we're looking closely through those to see where we even can make reductions, because so many of them are mandated. Children come with a plan that says these services are guaranteed to be provided to you, and we bear that cost without much choice. We had an uptick in costs that were handed to us by students that may not even be in the schools this year from the Department of Children and Families. We have about an $800,000 price tag each year. These are DCF-involved children that may not even be in our schools, and we may not have even recommended where they're currently getting their education, but we bear the cost of that. So we are, through a combination of staff layoffs and some use of one-time funds, we're looking to try to balance this budget, but obviously it's a sizable gap.
Is that because, sorry,
Counselor Mayo.
is that because they were at one point in the Greenfield public school system?
Not necessarily. They could have had a parent that was at one time residing in Greenfield, and so it could be the last known town or city of residence,
Okay.
and the child may never have set foot in a Greenfield Public Schools building.
No worry, that's totally fine.
And the mayor has very admirably gone after this because it is an unfunded mandate, and we're working on it, but a sort of solution and remedy to this is likely to be many budget seasons in the future, and it obviously is not going to help us with the FY19 budget situation.
Counselor Sund.
As teachers, it's best to have, so that certain classes aren't overrun with students, and you have enough teachers to provide. If you get some classes that are more students than the teacher can handle, it's better to have another teacher so you can divide them up to equally, and not so certain kids are, gee whiz, he needs some help, but this teacher is so busy because it's overloaded with class size, it is better to have an extra teacher than to forget half the students because, teacher can only handle so many.
That's right.
Counselor Mayo.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'm going to be diplomatic, but I'm just going to
Go for it.
go for it. Last week we heard from some students from Greenfield, and we heard that they were more than likely not going to approach, or they were more than likely not willing to approach a police officer for issues that may concern them. I've heard from members of the school committee. I've heard from members of the teachers. I've heard members of did I say the school committee? But anyway, I've heard from a conglomerate of people in Greenfield who they're not in favor of the SROs, or not in favor of the addition of SROs, and that they would rather see the money go towards shoring up the schools as you have suggested, more counselors, more teachers to fill in the gaps, because that's where the need has been identified. And seeing as though we've heard from a number of people in Greenfield, I just feel like I need to say that whereas I think the SROs are a good program. I didn't have an SRO when I was in school, but I didn't feel like I needed one. I was a weightlifter. I didn't need an SRO. Whereas I didn't need one, I recognize the need that SROs are a necessity. But in lieu of having an adequate school system, I think it's, to me, we need to take care of the schools first, rather than add an SRO to program, or in addition to that. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
I just want to be careful that Thank you for your statement, but I just want to address that I did have an SRO, and they provided emotional support just as much as physical safety. So, anywho, so again, it sounds like it's still a very it's a controversial thing, and I don't think it's public safety versus the schools, and I don't see it as that. But I do want to and it's just an overall issue. I have level budgets are great to advertise, but level budgets with no close insight into impact, it concerns me. And so one of my favorite news sayings I've said is that you can certainly find efficiencies, but you cannot and you will not ever cut yourself to greatness. And so I'm saddened to see that the budget was reduced by such an amount of number, because for economic development for the city of Greenfield, we need great schools. We need people moving in with families, with students to utilize our schools. And then once we build ourselves up in that regard, more and more companies will want to move here because we'll have more and more people in our workforce. It's all a trickle-down effect in that regard. So I know that we can allocate money to your budget if we can find it, and I hope that we're able to find it this year.
Thank you.
Any other comments from committee? No. Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Now go see your little one. Hi. There actually is no public speaking moment for this committee, but if you can keep it brief, I will. Thank you so much for attending our meeting. But sure, I will welcome you to speak.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. I just need you to identify yourself and let me know your address for the record. I know her.
You go first.
So my name is Ann Valentine. I wear many hats here in Greenfield. I am the president of the GEA. I am a fourth grade teacher at Federal Street School. I've been teaching here for over 25 years, as Miss Ashley remembers. And I no longer live in Greenfield. I did choice my children into Greenfield, but due to family situations, I am no longer living here, but I commute here multiple times during the day. So thank you very much. It's been a long evening, and it's been wonderful listening to all the conversations and all the concerns. As a teacher, as the GEA president, I listen to a lot of the teachers and hearing what they're saying. And the discussion is about where are we going to be able to support our children, and how is this going to happen? Is the budget really going to be detrimental to how we can bring our children to the support that we need? And as you know, a very tender subject is the SROs, and it has pros and cons. I'm here to talk to you about teachers that have been saying, we feel that our schools really are safe, but we feel that our schools are lacking in support staff. That once we get to know the children, that's our safety, where we really spend time with them. And when we do have some concerns, we can then say, I'd like to send this child's name on to a counselor or a psychologist. But when those staffing positions are not readily available, it's difficult. Overcrowding in classrooms is difficult. That's compounded. When we have a classroom in a first grade that is large, some of those children don't get some of the assistance that they need. Then they go on to second grade without having some of the skills that they needed in first grade. It's compounded, and it really does take its toll on the children. But looking at our budget and what can we do to say that it's really important for us to have the staffing here. We have a lot of really good programs, the responsive classroom where you get to know children, the restorative practice in the high school and now the middle school, where you really get to know the kids. But that's with staff. And I think if we have to look at the budget, where can we place the money that's going to best help the children directly? And there is a concern about having more resource officers versus teachers, and it's hard, versus, it really is. Mm-hmm. But if we look at what's the initial impact of the children, it's getting to know the children and making sure that they have adequate programs, small enough classes where we really can see what's going on and getting to know them. And children that are concerned frightened or happy come to a teacher to say, this is my concern, this happened at recess. And that, I think, is their comfort level. And the comfort level is there because we have the staffing, or we'd hope to have the staffing that supports that. But we do know this is a very difficult budget decision for everybody in this town, and we know that. I just get to have the ear of all the teachers that come to me and say, they're going to spend the money here, could they do this, is something we could do? And sometimes they'll come to me or Paul DeMarco, as opposed to coming to the Ways and Means Council, as we see. But it's important for us to have that voice and to come back to you to say, what can we do to help? But we want you to know that we really need to have our children supported with the staff that's going to allow them to feel safe and grow. Ultimately, instead of the trickle-down theory, I think it's the trickle-up theory. The stronger our schools are, the more they rise in the elementary school and the middle school and the high school, the stronger our town becomes. And then people do want to come and they want to stay.
Our theories are the same. It just depends if you're up or down. And right now I'm tired, so my trickle's going down.
Yeah. I like the growth up method, but we really appreciate you taking the time and listening to all of the concerns. And the decision's not easy. Where is the money going to come? How are we going to spend it? But my point of view is, I'm with the kids every day. I'm with the staff every day, and I listen to their concerns and the parents. And I know many of the parents and children feel safe. They really do feel it's a wonderful school system, and they do feel safe. I think some of the classes are a little overcrowded, and that makes it hard to teach sometimes.
Paul, do you want to add
Yeah.
something?
Hi, my name's Paul DeMarco. I work with the Massachusetts Teachers Association, represent the Greenfield Education Association and some surrounding districts. And I'd just like to point out on page 25 of the budget book, this is to answer the question of where you can find some of the funds. I think one answer is to keep the current SRO relationship in place. And the second would be, from my perspective, if you look on page 25 of the budget book, you'll see an item there identified as snow and ice deficit, and it contains $300,000. In previous years, it had zero. I'm assuming that this is put in there because the city wants to have a reserve fund for when you have a really bad snow year or something like that. But honestly, that should be coming out of the city's general reserves. That's what general reserves are for, when you have rainy day fund, snowy day fund, that kind of thing. But if you turn to page 44 of that budget book, and sorry, I have this up not much longer.
I appreciate you attending and asking to speak, so it's absolutely fine.
Thanks. So if you look down in the Public Works budget, you'll see snow and ice removal. Last year was $217,000, now it's $225,000, I think. Sorry, I don't have the budget book in front of me. I just have some crib sheets on my phone. $300,000 is more than a year's worth of snow. It's a year and a quarter or something like that. It's really overfunding this kind of thing. If you were to use, let's say you wanted to set up a separate reserve just for snow and ice removal, just in case you had a bad year, then you might want to use the same benchmark the state recommends for the general fund, which would be 12%. That would come out to about $28,000. So I think if you combine what is being proposed to be taken out of the school budget to be put into the SROs and this extra $278,000, you're getting halfway or almost halfway to the school committee's budget, but that's at least a start. So I just want to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Always good to see you.
Because we don't always get to hear from the teachers, you know, so I appreciate you attending.
Well, you know where we work. Thanks.
Oh, I'll find you. Do you want to speak to or no? Any other discussion for committee?
None.
None. Great. All right. That being said, other business, I just want to announce our next meeting for our budget discussions is Tuesday, May 1st at the planning office. So we're at GCTV tonight. Next week's meeting, we're back to Tuesday. That's 5:30 p.m. at the planning office, the back meeting room at 114 Main Street. And we will be discussing infrastructure and transportation, meeting with the DPW, the FRTA, and the FERCOG. FERCOG might not be able to make it. I have to give her a call, but that's okay. And just to reiterate, back to Tuesdays, at the planning office, not at GCTV. Without further ado, can I have a motion for adjournment?
Second.
Perfect, an amount of people here to have a meeting, I guess. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? Wonderful. I will call this meeting adjourned at 7:26 p.m. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
All of our productions at GCTV are sponsored in part by Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. Greenfield Community College, providing access and excellence in higher education in the Pioneer Valley. Visit them at gcc.mass.edu. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com. Call them at 772-0838 and check them out on Facebook. Real Cleaning Services, cleaning Hampshire and Franklin County since 1972. We don't cut corners, we clean them. Check them out online at realclean.com. Call them at 413-422-1143. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. The Solar Store of Greenfield, replacing fossil fuels and nuclear power one home at a time. Visit them at 23 Fisk Ave. Call them at 413-772-3122 or visit them online at solarstoreofgreenfield.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all of GCTV's productions.